Well, welcome to another edition of GW Unspoken, where we discuss stuff we don't typically talk about, but probably should. And we're here with Season 10, Episode 7. We have 2 episodes left to go with mindfulness. And how are you traveling out there? Are you giving it a go? Are you struggling to even attempt it and say, Gary, I'm still too busy, or I don't like that stuff? All right, well, today we're going to talk about that exact thing. We're going to talk about avoidance, specifically how mindfulness exposes everything you've been avoiding and why that's a good thing. Because here's the truth, you can't fix what you won't feel. And mindfulness isn't always calm, gentle, or soothing. Sometimes it's confronting. Sometimes it actually cracks you open. And sometimes that's exactly what you and I need. Because let's call it for what it is. Here's the problem. We're not too busy to slow down. We're often too afraid of what will show up if we do slow down. And mindfulness does it. It actually makes us stop. And when we stop, guess what rushes in? Maybe the grief you haven't processed. Maybe the anxiety you've numbed with scrolling. The burnout you've masked as motivation. We've built entire lives around numbing, avoiding, and pushing forward because feeling feels like weakness, especially in a culture that celebrates and hustle and labels and stillness as laziness. So we know that. We know that if we look busy, we must be important. So we don't have time for mindfulness, right? But, we talk about neuroscience. Here's what the science actually says. The brain is hardwired for comfort and protection. It will steer you away from things that are negative. It will look to things that will actually save your brain time and energy. All right, so it's hardwired for that comfort and protection. When the emotional discomfort shows up, your amygdala fires off alarm bells, triggering that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So naturally, we look for escape routes. We look for Instagram, Netflix, maybe a bottle of wine, work, online shopping, maybe another coffee, or here's one we've all done. No, I'm fine. You've used it before, haven't you? The I'm fine mask. But here's what mindfulness actually does differently. It actually activates the prefrontal cortex. That's the rational part of your brain that actually helps regulate emotion. It downregulates the amygdala, right? So it actually can help you calm. So even naming what you're feeling can lower the intensity of it. So that's why mindfulness isn't about feeling good. It's about feeling honesty. When was the last time you actually said, hey, I'm actually fine, rather than just naming that emotion that you actually felt? Here's another thing that mindfulness doesn't tell you, or no one tells you about mindfulness. Stillness can be more terrifying than chaos. When everything finally goes quiet and you're left with yourself, what happens? If you've spent years running from unresolved emotions, unprocessed trauma, or your own unmet needs, stillness can feel like a threat. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop resisting the feeling is the moment it begins to actually soften. Pain intensifies in avoidance. It loses power in presence. Mindfulness can actually give you the space to say, I don't love this, but I can actually sit with it. And that's when your inner healing actually starts. But, let me be real with you guys. My avoidance is sneaky. It wears the costume of getting stuff done. I love being busy. So, how many times I've gone and maybe done another lot of folding, or made another cup of coffee, or, I just got to answer these 43 emails when actually I probably just need to cry about what was going on. Avoidance often looks like achievement, right? But it actually feels like disconnection, and that's one of the worst things we can feel. What mindfulness does? It's a nudge that says, hey, what are you actually running from right now? So how do we let mindfulness meet our avoidance without being overwhelmed? Well, here's a few ideas. Number one, I talked about before, name the feeling without fixing it. Just say, hey, I'm noticing sadness, or I feel tight in my chest, or I don't know what this is, but it's here. That presence is sometimes just enough for the amygdala to calm down and that prefrontal cortex to engage and say, this is actually the honesty thing, how I'm feeling. How about number 2? Allow discomfort to pass through and not build up. So emotions actually do have a lifespan. Research says that if we fully feel them, most pass in about 90 seconds. So rather than do what I was saying before and doing those strategies or those behaviors of avoidance, don't do that. Avoidance doesn't shorten the storm. It actually stretches it out, because deep down in your own inner feelings, you know what you're putting off. All right. You're just feeling better because you think at the time, if I'm busy, it'll go away. And number 3, how about this? Practice mindful discomfort. So instead of soothing right away, pause, breathe, watch what happens. You're not broken. You just begin to feel again, and that's probably good for your relationships around you as well. So look, there's a few hard-hitting things there, some suggestions, some ideas, but here's some 3 journal prompts. Again, whatever gets measured gets improved. It's easy not to write things down. We know based on facts. I actually don't know how this happens. I'm not sure there's people out there who does know how this happens, but when you write things down, like goals, suggestions, journal entries, things actually do start happening. So here's some of the journal prompts for today. Here's 3. Number 1, write down this. What's one emotion you've been avoiding? What are you afraid will happen if you feel it fully? What's going to happen? Write down. Number 2, where am I mistaking busyness for regulation or productivity for peace? All right, write that down. And 3rd, more of an action of how to maybe improve this is, how could you create space this week to feel instead of fix or flee? All right, how could you create that space? All right, because here's the truth, legends. Here it is. Mindfulness is not about feeling good. Right? It's about feeling true. It's uncomfortable, it's raw, it's real. It's also where growth begins, because you can't heal what you won't allow yourself to face. So I'm Gary. This is GW Unspoken, the podcast where we breathe, pause, feel, and stop pretending that we're fine. I'll catch you next week for our last episode.